Hello, everyone, and happy Friday. Jen Wilson and I are back today for our leadership lunch chat. And we have a lot on our mind this morning from this week, the past weeks, even things that have come up from other talks. So we want to talk about a topic today around relevancy. And it becomes really important from a leadership perspective because as the world changes, as work changes, it's really important to understand our skill set, our knowledge set, what we're contributing, and whether it's still relevant or there's work we need to do to make it relevant or to help find those people that will help create the knowledge base that we need. And a lot of times what this takes in leadership is vulnerability, which is really hard when we get to certain stages of our career, any stage of our career, right? We're experts in what we do. Sometimes it's very hard to admit we're out of our comfort zone, or we have no interest as well. So I'll let you go from there, Jen, if you wanted to kick that off.
Yeah, I love relevancy. So first of all, it's like a buzzword or something that is sometimes said in our profession. And, anybody who understands entrepreneurship understands that you decide that you're going to have a business or a firm and you're going to offer a service or a product to a customer or client, and it better be relevant to them or they're not going to buy it, right? That's called marketing 101 or something. And so, I don't think that you and I are trying to be that literal, but it is that literal in that as individual leaders, we have to have relevant skills, relevant ideas, relevant solutions, relevant conversations with people in order for them to want to listen, want to participate, want to be influenced by us. We have to be up to the minute, if you will. And if we're not, then people start tuning us out and they don't want to follow us because they don't think we get what's happening in the market today. So it's an individual thing. It's like keeping your saw sharp. But it's also, and it's not just like skills, but it's being willing to change the way you think. I would love it if all it was like, I just need to bone up on some technology or something. It's not like that. I think the whole diversity, equity, and inclusion movement and the need for more justice and equity for people of color and for people of different sexual orientations or preferences, for men and women, all of that. That's not like I'm going to read a book and I will suddenly be more skilled at that. That requires I need to learn and listen and understand and start changing the way I think and the way I, react. And because I have to go and change as our society is changing so that I can be relevant again, or so I can remain relevant. Otherwise, I become a traditionalist and at some point sort of a dinosaur. And so I just think it's an individual thing, but it's also a corporate thing. Mm-hmm. Is our firm relevant? Are the services we're offering relevant? Are the conversations we're having with our talent relevant to them right now? For instance, Amy, a really good example of relevancy this minute is there's a lot of motivation and hope problems. We're missing some hope. We finished the March 15th deadline. We've got a May 15th extension, not very popular with many. They're nervous that they're hearing there might be a push to June, which they would be super sad by. They feel like there's a relentlessness to the legislation. They can't keep up. Their clients can't keep up either. They don't have enough staff. There's this a big conversation of sort of hopelessness. If I'm a firm leader and I'm going to, have a team meeting and I'm going to talk to you about our top line objectives and cash collections and, we need to get, bills out and, don't forget about the payroll tax credits. And, like, I'm going to talk to you about all that, but I'm not going to talk to you about like that we're tired and we're getting a little burnt and that we might feel a little hopeless. And I'm not going to try to elevate a conversation to bring some hope and remind us of our higher purpose as a group and acknowledge that this is hard and ask what I could do to help you with the difficulty. Then I'm not relevant. I'm just spouting a bunch of junk that's business junk that you're sitting there thinking, I'm burnt to the crisp and I don't care about this stuff. So I just think firm leaders have to have their fingers on the pulse of their people and their firm and their clients in order to even have a good and relevant Monday morning meeting.
Yeah, and I think it goes beyond as far as just the way we are working, because a lot of times different generations are working in different ways, and there's a trust factor of keeping things, when we talk about working remote or coming back to the office, that it's listening with a sense. So this is really where mindfulness comes into leadership, of a sense of empathy. It's a sense of trying to understand with compassion and walking in somebody else's shoes. So if we ask people to speak up, if we ask them questions of how things are affecting them, whether it has to do with diversity and inclusion or just everyday work, we have to be open to being really present in that conversation and trying to imagine what it's like to be in their shoes without defensiveness. What I think hard is, like anybody, anywhere where everybody works hard and sees their way of being, and especially as leaders, sometimes it can be a very lonely place to be. But when things start changing and you don't change, the problem is that it doesn't mean people aren't talking about you. It means that they are just doing it where you can't hear it, but it doesn't mean it's not happening. And it starts reducing your effectiveness as a leader, because people do feel like you're understanding what today's current issue is, what today's burnout is, what today's diversity issues are. And maybe there was a way you handled it in the past, and maybe there was a way that worked in the past. And a lot of times I think what gets frustrating as a consultant or coach when we talk to different people, that the answer a lot of times is, we've tried that before, we've done that before. But you might have tried it under different circumstances, a different environment. There's new information now, there's new things to learn about what the current issues are of today. So what's really hard is getting back to that mind when you've gotten very experienced in your career. But are you still contributing? Are you still additive? Or are you subtracting from a conversation, or actually creating, behind the scenes chaos in the culture because you're having, trouble with just being open with change? And how do I become relevant as a leader today? And one thing about any type of human relationship is it never stays stagnant. So things that might have worked 10 years ago don't necessarily work today. And it's being very open that, I got to learn new things, and listen to what someone younger has to say, or listen to what someone from a different race or ethnicity has to say, because I've never walked in their shoes and I don't really understand what it's like to lead and keep happiness and culture. So when we talk about relevancy, it's getting really, really present, accepting the situation for what it is without trying to bring the past into it or think through the future, and drawing a place of compassion for the current situation so that you can do the right learning that you need to do and respond in the way that's going to be additive.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much there. And I love that you use the change word. I don't know if we ever do a Friday leadership lunch chat where we don't use the word.
I know, right?
Sorry, everyone. But, and you can't be relevant unless you're willing to change, because nothing stays the same. The market doesn't stay the same. Generational differences dictate that all ways change. All ways change. And so, if you want to be relevant to Gen Z and millennial buyers, you will not be relevant if you try to approach everything the way you did with baby boomer buyers. Period. So I love that you're talking about change and relevancy at the same time. And I think where the first place of change is I change my mind. I change the way I think. And how can I change the way I think? You were talking about listening. So, one of the most powerful ways you can identify what is relevant today to the audience, because relevancy is audience specific. So it's like a person, what's relevant to Amy, that's one audience. What's relevant to a buyer class or group, what's relevant to a talent group. Like, I think what's relevant to the tax people in your firm right now is different than what's relevant to the auditors. I personally think that like the relevancy for those audiences is different right this minute. They have a different story to tell, and what's bothering them and what's inhibiting them, and also what they see as possible for them, the opportunities, they're different. So relevancy is audience specific. And how do I know what's relevant to my audience? I ask, I listen, I read what they're reading, I read what they're writing. I attend sessions they're producing. I ask and I listen. And like you said, I don't argue it. Because they're telling you what's relevant to them. And so you can't say, well, that's irrelevant. So I'm serious. Like, that's what argument is. It's like brushing it off. I don't believe in what you're saying, because here's what I know from my old way of thinking. And old ways of thinking do not get you where you want to be. And those that are truly relevant, they're not just trying to figure out what's going on with my audience now. They are thinking what's going to happen with my audience a year or 2 or 3 from now. So what is relevant to this person? Where are they headed in their career? What do I need to do for them? What's relevant for this entire group of clients? What's going to happen to their industry or profession? How much automation is coming? How much consolidation is coming? What's going to be relevant for them 3 years from now? A really wonderful advisor, a really wonderful leader is guiding people, like envisioning what might be relevant. And listening so important.
Yeah, that's where we can never stay stagnant and go back, right? Like, that's where you have to always be staying up to date and current and looking into the future and researching and learning. And if it doesn't interest you, then that's the vulnerable part of like, well, maybe this isn't the right place for me anymore. And I think that's a very hard thing. Like, I remember when I sold my business and I was on a plane to go start a corporate job after having this business for over 10 years. And it was, anyone that's had a business knows it's your heart and soul.
Yes.
And I sold it, which should have been, happy. But when, for 2 weeks after, I was depressed. I had to keep pushing myself to go outside and run. It was like losing an arm or an appendix,
Yeah.
And I happened to have read this article on the plane on the way to my new job of like, still questioning what have I done here? Was this the right thing? And it was in the yoga journal. So it was about one of these yoga instructors that she's nationally known, top of her game, any national training, she's asked to be there. And she kept showing up to this woman's class. in California. And at the end of class, she'd disappear. And that younger teacher wanted to meet her so badly. And every time she'd show up, she'd disappear. And finally, she caught her one day and said, "I'm so honored that you're taking my class. Would you mentor me?" And, now this woman's a decade older, in her career. And she turned to her, paused, and said, "When you feel threatened by the next generation coming up, then I want you to pay this back." And you walk toward her and not away.
Oh,
and know that your next place, if you don't allow that space to bring in that next person, then you can't do your next best thing, whatever that may be, and that may be to let go or to release, because this isn't right for you anymore. But it's having that honest reflection of yourself of where is your next best place, and is it this? Right. Is it of interest to you anymore? And knowing that is the best gift you can give that next person to take that spot.
Yeah, I love that story. I mean, that's so powerful. And I think about the people that came before me. Yeah. And that invited me into their groups and clubs and walked toward me as I was a loudmouth, up and comer who had opinions and perspective on what needed to change. I haven't changed being a loudmouth, I don't think, but I definitely am not that same sort of upstart or whatever you want to call that. And I think that is such a powerful thing that mentor woman said, don't be threatened, walk toward it, mentor them, develop them, and then go find your next thing.
Yeah. But I also think what was important is she was honest that she was.
Yes.
Right. Because that's a natural human reaction. So that's not a bad thing. It's just that then what do you do with it?
Well, expressing it, the vulnerability of that's super powerful. I mean, she's obviously a pretty evolved leader that she would be able to say that to a stranger who is coming toward her. And I love it on many levels. And I think something else you said there, and you said it a little earlier, is this idea of like, maybe I'm not supposed to keep doing what I'm doing. And this conversation of relevancy and listening and what do I need to change? It doesn't just include like, I'm going to change my mind and change what I say. It might be, I'm going to altogether change what I'm doing or not be doing it here anymore. Right. And I think when we're thinking about a whole generation of baby boomers and older X's are approaching a place in their lives where they may not want the hill climb required in relevancy.
And the time required to stay relevant, right? I mean, it's all of it, right?
Well, but I mean, I kind of call it a hill climb because I think it's time, it's effort, it's energy, it's, and if they're making the hill climb, are they whining all the way up the hill, or are they like, this is awesome, and I do think that that is something to contemplate. And I know I encounter a lot of leaders who, it isn't just age-based, but who are sort of complaining about the journey and complaining about all the changes they're being required to make by the marketplace or whatever, instead of just saying, hey man, change is the one true constant. And I'm going to look for hope and opportunity inside these changes. And I'm going to shift my mental and verbal game here and show up and climb the hill with zeal or enthusiasm, and not as a complainer, whiner, or frankly, try to tell everybody, I don't know what hill you're talking about, let's stay down here, and hold the group back, which doesn't make sense. And if you can't do those things, maybe you should be on a different hike, maybe, or no hike at all. Maybe you should stay back. And so, I just think that this conversation is so important because I think that one of the things we do to hide relevancy from ourselves is get really busy.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really easy way for me to keep from having to be market responsive or internally team responsive is be buried. And so, you could just be like, wow, this treadmill that we're on here, team, we've got tons of work and we're just going to keep racking up the work. And we can push this conversation of change because we're just a little too busy to do it right now. And I think that's a sad but normal way of handling it, and a leaderly way of handling it is to say, yeah, we're pretty dang busy, but we're going to have to either reduce some of the busyness or make these changes despite the busyness, because boy, we don't want to wake up having been on a treadmill when everybody else was actually running and making ground ahead of us, and we're no longer competitively relevant.
Right. Well, awesome. We are out of time. This was a really great conversation to work through and talk through as usual with you, Jen. So we hope everybody has a great weekend, and we'll be back next Friday.
Okay. See you then.